journalist. I was a reporter and copy editor for newspapers throughout Florida. So I am a professor of journalism here at UL. And in terms of research, one of the things I look into is social media, media effects. And one of the things I've become interested in is Slacktivism. I've noticed on the program, there's a lot of sort of optimism and good feelings about social media and all the change it can provide. So I'm about to be very popular because I am going to provide the opposite of all that. Not totally, I'll be fair, but talking about some of the things that social media has done in terms of online engagement and activism and how it's been sort of a mixed bag when it comes to why we post what we post and what we feel is important and sharing with other people. So yeah, I'm just gonna go ahead and get started. Come on. Does anybody remember this? This might be before some of the students' time. It was about 10 years ago. So Coney 2012, it was one of the first, I'd say, majorly viral things. I think it really inspired a lot of research into what social media can do in terms of social change and social engagement and activism, just for those who are unfamiliar with it. So it was a Slacktivist campaign in the sense that there was a 28-minute video created by an organization called Invisible Children. And it went into something that was evolved. It was a dangerous situation for children in Africa at the hands of somebody named Joseph Coney. He was the leader of what was called the Lord's Resistance Army. The LRA at the time abducted, I believe it's about 60,000 children. And they used, according to the video, they were brainwashing boys to fight for them. And they were turning young girls into sex slaves. So there was a video uncovering all of this, and it was called Coney 2012, and it became the fastest growing viral video of the time. It reached 100 million views in 6 days, which at the time was almost unheard of. If you do remember when this occurred, it basically took over the news cycle for a couple days. It made for a lot of news. So this organization created this movie, and they wanted to raise awareness about this event. So did it work? Well, it depends on how you define work. It raised awareness, which I think I can argue is kind of a nebulous term. It's kind of vague. Awareness doesn't mean much. You're aware, now what? But the success of the campaign was attributed mostly by how many people viewed the video rather than the donations received. So after watching, many viewers felt compelled to take action, but it took the form of sharing the video and potentially pledging their support. So what happened was everybody was outraged and everybody thought this was a major issue, but in terms of actually donating money, most people just shared the video, hence the virality of it, and they pledged support, which doesn't necessarily mean you gave it. As of 2000, I had to look this up because again, this was a blip in the news cycle a while ago. I think we've all forgotten about it. As of 2017, the hunt for Coney was called off by international authorities. The LRA was no longer considered an active threat. There's about 100 soldiers left, and it is estimated as of 2021. And Coney is still out there. He is still a fugitive. They just basically gave up the search for him. So we're going to come back to this. I want to open with this because it's a good example of what I mean by Slacktivism. So I have a question for everybody, which you don't necessarily have to answer, but how many of us posted online to show support for some sort of social cause or some sort of, to show outrage towards some injustice they may have seen in the media? I think most of us have, everybody has. I mean, it's fair. I see raised hands, yes. So we are all maybe guilty of Slacktivism. So what do I mean by Slacktivism? So it's also called clicktivism, but it's basically it's supporting a political or social cause using social media or online petitions. So change.org, things like that, tweeting a specific hashtag in order to show your support or opposition to a cause. This includes liking and sharing posts about this, this phenomenon, copy and pasting a supporting status or message, sharing specific hashtags, altering one's profile photo, or avatar to show solidarity towards a movement. That's another common technique. You see that especially on Facebook and Instagram. So kind of straightforward what we mean by Slacktivism, but why do we do this? Well, the easy answer is it's because it's easy. It's easy to share this stuff online. It's easy to show support. So again, activism, true activism, takes many forms ranging from petitions to street marches, Again, the word activism incorporates a lot of different activities that typically take place in the real world, so to speak. At its best, it's effective when it's collective action. So we need basically a large number of people to get involved. And once they take that action in the form of however it takes its form, there will be some sort of social change if successful. Over time, this can become a social movement. So Black Lives Matter is a perfect example of this. How it was based off of social injustice, and people took to the streets and engaged on social media, and it started to organize and coalesce, and it is now a social movement. That's hard to do. Actual activism can be very hard. It takes effort, time, sometimes personal risk. It can be dangerous to take a stand on certain issues, especially in more repressive governments. And it can also take money. And some examples, the labor movement, the women's rights movement, and the civil rights movement of the 20th century. These are all examples of social movements that were influenced a big part by activism. So Slacktivism, again, it's easier. It takes less friction to show support, right? So it's much easier than hitting the streets, for example. We just pick up our phones, make a post, and we're done. It's the easiest way to get involved, which is not necessarily a bad thing. It can raise awareness quickly, but again, what is awareness? What do you do once you're aware, right? So we see this a lot with our friends in public relations. There's a lot of teaching of how to raise awareness for a campaign, things like that. Well, okay, we're aware. Now what, right? Sometimes there's not a specific call to action. Again, the desire people have to do something good without getting out of their chair. This is a somewhat negative definition of slacktivism. But again, there's less friction. Social media and the way algorithms and the platforms are designed, it's designed to be easy to post and share and comment. So again, it's easier to share our opinions on things and share our support for issues. So Morozov in 2011, he said, when communication costs are low, groups can easily spring into action. Okay, so social media, one of the benefits of it is communication costs are very low. We don't need a broadcast license. We don't need a printing press. We don't need, typically the costs to get involved to participate in media have been significantly lowered. So this is all great. Why am I here? What's the problem then? Oh, by the way, I see in the chat, if you have chats, I can't see them at the moment, but I will get to them. And I do look forward to questions. So what's the problem? Why am I here? Why am I so pessimistic about slacktivism? Well, there are some issues. Some of you may have seen this type of photo showed on social media. You may have changed your profile picture to represent it, but we have some issues here. So one is publicity does not equal action. So similar to awareness, just because you are aware of something does not necessarily mean you are going to take action. It is not a linear relationship. This is especially true for larger issues, things of national and international importance. The war in Ukraine, for example, that is something that is complex and international. It's hard for us as individuals to get involved. Liking does not equal money. So again, social movements and activism do require financing and an organization. Simply liking a post does not contribute to that. You do not get money for getting a post that is liked. One of the major things is we have an underlying assumption that social media can solve social problems. This hasn't really been well established. One of the things, and I'll talk about this a little later, is that you'll notice I'm picking evidence from all these specific cases. There's no research that shows activism overall leads to social movements and social activism, right? So social media, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. So there are specific things where people can get involved and it's effective, but most of the time it doesn't. This can prevent or lessen, I should say, participation in real life, in politics. You can feel, I shared my opinion online, I've done enough, I feel good, right? And I don't have to do this. I don't have to actually participate. And to keep piling on, the novelty wears off as people realize that, maybe your participation had no effect, right? You lose hope in all forms of activism. Well, I did this and nothing happened. What else can I do? There's a feeling of powerlessness that can come from engaging in online activism through social media. It does not necessarily, like I said, lead to real world activism, but there are instances where there have been small effects, between those who engage online in politics and on Facebook in this study with those who engage off of it. But the key thing here is those people who show this positive relationship were already highly inclined to be interested in politics. So you can take that for what it's worth. Another interesting fact that I actually learned yesterday and added this at the last moment, the 10 most shared online petitions to the UK Parliament, they have an open petition system in the United Kingdom. All 10 were unsuccessful. Nothing changed as of 2017. So again, online activism, think about it like this. It's easier to ignore an email than it is to a phone call, right? So again, less friction to produce, but also less friction to consume. So let's go back to Coney. I'm a journalism professor. I'm a journalist at heart. I like to follow the money. So after Coney, it was again 100 million views in a matter of days. Still to this day, people are using this as a case study for online activism. Where did that money go? The online film asked viewers to send money to the filmmakers rather than African law enforcement. That should be a red flag, number one, which people did. They sent a lot of money, $31.9 million. So the charity, it was registered as a charity. They raised $31.9 million of gross receipts after watching this film, after people watched this film. But where did that money go? Well, the money was used to make another movie about stopping Coney. The money did not go to actual law enforcement or aiding any sort of capture or investigation of Coney himself. The money went to the filmmakers to make another movie. One more thing about this is also virtue signaling. You need to ask yourself, why are you sharing this? I think there's an element of us that we share because we care about a situation, or do we want to show other people that you are a good person? A large element of social media is what's called, there's a self-presentation theory. We don't actually show our true selves on social media. We show the self that we want people to see. Reality, according to the science so far, why not both? You can be outraged by something, but you can also want to show your social network that you are a good person. So they are different things. These experiences, these mental processes are different, but psychologically, many people who virtue signal in these instances are also experiencing genuine outrage. So both can be true. But public token actions sap our motivation to do more because they satisfy our impression management motives. Again, posting online about our support for these issues can, again, it takes all the effort out and we're like, okay, we saw a part of our brain feels like we've done enough. We don't have to do anymore. So in other words, when we click like on a social media post, our natural human tendency is to think about how others will react to our behavior. This is why we post on social media, right? To show our lives to other people. So we're sharing these opinions or support or, disdain for a social cause. We do that with the primary intent is to show other people what we think. If that's not the major reason, why do it? Here's an example of this was a campaign that was done in Europe. It's hardcore. This is one of them, but basically it makes the point that liking isn't helping. Okay, and this kind of gets to the point of what I'm trying to say. Liking alone and just posting alone, are we actually doing anything? I think there's an argument to be made that no, we're not. And perhaps this is taking away from real activism because people now feel like they don't have to do anymore. Now I'm generalizing a lot and I want to be fair. This is not all bad. It's not an either or thing. The quick spread of knowledge thanks to smartphones can lead to real world change. An example here is the 2011 Egyptian revolution. So this was before Coney. Maybe some of you remember this, but protests were organized, real world protests in Tahrir Square and other areas in Egypt were organized via text messaging and social media. This is how they were able to get groups of people together and organize a time and place. So here we have this mixture of social media mixing with the real world and actually causing change. If you know the story, the Egyptian revolution, they overthrew the government. So one of the things to take away from this is that posting and showing support for causes on social media can actually have an effect in repressive countries and in repressive cultures, where speaking out can mean a great risk. Here's a quote: "We use Facebook to schedule the protest, Twitter to coordinate, and YouTube to tell the world." We're seeing this now with Ukraine. Citizen journalists and people who are trying to document things. You're seeing evidence of war crimes and other outrageous things. These are from smartphones. So technology has really helped in terms of spreading information and sharing information globally in a tremendously short amount of time. Some studies do indicate a higher desire to participate after viewing slacktivist content, but no mention of actual participation. So this is like one of my favorite studies or polling that shows, polls of likely voters. Well, what does that mean? That doesn't mean you actually voted, right? You could be highly motivated to do something, but there's no measure of actual participation. This can be actually hard to discern. It can lead to quicker growth of real world protests. Again, using Egypt as an example, it garnered support very quickly and allowed for very easy and frictionless organization to participate in a real world protest. And with what's going on with the Black Lives Matter movement, this could be upending everything I'm talking about. This could be actually changing things and how online social media activism is influencing and affected by the real world. So social media plays a very large part in the success of this movement and could provide a way to legitimize quote unquote slacktivism. I should say slacktivism was a term coined in the mid-90s, and it actually was not a pejorative. It was meant to say, now it's easier, so now we can all do it, right? It was meant to be a helpful term, but it's kind of been spun. So what? Why am I talking about this? Why is this important? In terms of UL and Psychology Day. So liking and sharing content about political or social causes, it can be useful, but it's important to understand why we are engaging with it. What are the motivations and attitudes influencing why we are engaging with this content? Could this energy be more constructively used? So again, the mental energy used to post something on Facebook, could we do something more productive with that? So another study by a well-known communications researcher, it provides an enhanced ability to rally protest, but it's accompanied by a weakened ability to actually make an impact. So it's kind of a paradox. So does posting or sharing actually make us feel less powerful? So what else can I do? It's just me, I can't get involved, right? It's up to the other people to take action. I did my part. There's only so much I can do as an individual, right? So this can actually contribute to that feeling of powerlessness. And also, who's behind the campaign? So again, Coney, we could say, let's note the scam, so to speak, right? Coney, I don't know if you're familiar with the aftermath of it, but the person who created the campaign ended up kind of going insane from all the media coverage. He was arrested for running around Los Angeles nude. Yeah, the whole Coney thing, it's a whole circus. To conclude this, I'm looking forward to your questions, but I want to talk about one last scenario that I think is kind of instructive. The Chibok schoolgirls kidnapping. So there's an Islamic terrorist group called Boko Haram. They kidnapped 276 young school-age girls in Nigeria in 2014. This generated millions and millions of tweets under this hashtag, Bring Back Our Girls, including our former First Lady, Michelle Obama. You may have seen this photo used in memes, right? And where they replaced the text to make jokes. But that's where this photo came from, was from this social slacktivist movement, so to speak. As of 2021, more than 100 girls remain missing out of 276. So it's still an ongoing issue. These girls they're just lost. We don't know if they're alive or dead. And there's an uncle of one of the kidnapped girls who had a saying, or it was quoted in a news story, I should say. There's a saying that actions speak louder than words. Leaders from around the world came out and said they would assist to bring the girls back, but now we hear nothing. The question I wish to raise is why? If they knew they would not do anything, they wouldn't have even made that promise at all. By just coming out to tell the world, I see that as a political game, which it shouldn't be so far as the girls are concerned. So I think with all this and with social movements and with online slacktivism and our own personal motivations and beliefs, sometimes we forget that real people can be harmed by these events and these atrocities. So that's something to keep in mind when we share these things on social media. We forget that real people exist on the other end of this communication. With that, thank you very much. I believe probably, went a little short, but again, my name is Dr. Stevenson Waters. It's Dr. Steve Waters. Stevenson is for paperwork. I'm located in Burke Hawthorne Hall, room 109. There's my email and my Twitter handle if you want to engage online in slacktivism with me. I don't really contribute, but if you want to follow me online or get in touch, I'm always happy to talk to other professors and students. And if you have any questions, I would love to hear them.
Thank you very much, Dr. Waters. I wasn't sure I knew what exactly Slacktivism completely is or was or is, but of course, I was invited by Dr. Perkins one day to go to the Coffee Cottage, and I thought he was inviting me to engage in just kind of slacking, just being a slacker, and that's what I thought about when I thought about Slacktivism initially. But really, when I was planning on introducing you, and I said the term Slacktivism, it made me. I've never really engaged in any political action, but I felt motivated to engage in some kind of action. But what you share, I'm just kind of kidding around to some degree, but very interesting what you shared, and really appreciate the information. And would like to open it up to anyone with any comments or questions, and certainly Mrs. Waters, feel free to comment as well.
So some background before we, when I was invited to do this, I was asked, I was trying to come up with a topic. So I was talking about it with my wife, and she's like, a lot of the stuff you research is boring. Talk about Slacktivism. People like that. I was like, okay, and she was, I listened to her. It was good advice. But yeah, thank you for all the kind words. But yeah, it's hard not to sound like I'm just coming down on everybody who posts. We all do this, right? It's human nature. Yes, my wife takes all the credit. But it's one of those things where we need to start looking into why we're doing this and the potential harms, if any, if we're actually becoming less inclined to actively participate. But to what you said about slacking at Cafe Cottage, I wholeheartedly endorse that. Slacking in person is something. I'm a former journalist. We try to be as lazy as possible, right? So I support that.
I certainly was thinking about the social psychology arena, and certainly I taught intro psych in a while, but certainly was thinking about bystander apathy and whatnot, and what you were saying earlier, and how in some respects I promote some of that by suggesting that we've engaged to some degree, but at the same time not really engaging more extensively. But that's very interesting. Thank you very much.
That's definitely an interesting way to put it in terms of bystander apathy. It's like we feel like we're not, or we're lessening that effect, maybe the bystander, but it's sort of like a false alternative, right? We're still not doing anything. There's still a bystander effect there, but
even the aspect of some mob violence, and sometimes the individuation of the situation sometimes, and there's some engagement and there's some activity, but without knowing exactly why, so there's some relationship there as well. But I'd like to open it up to, I'm sorry.
Oh, so you brought up an interesting point with the de-individuation. So one thing like the side model in social media, we don't really see the other person as a person. We tend to dehumanize those. We see so now we're getting into polarization, all these other effects in terms of politics. And so, yeah, there's lots of issues there. I think that, I see an example here for the Me Too movement, which I think is that's another one. So social media, again, it was a major topic. And then Louis C.K. goes and wins a Grammy the other day. So how much is it really, what's it really doing? But importantly, this is a complicated issue, right? There's a lot more going on than just us posting on social media. But yeah, it's one of those things where we can all get enraged online, but we're kind of stressing ourselves out. Are we really actually contributing?
I had a question.
Sure.
Having like journalistic leanings, this might be by something that you'd have some information on, have there been any examples or evidence? Because it seems to me, given what you talked about, that there might be, that organizations that are, or individuals that are doing things that need to be stopped could actually intentionally try to create an online protest movement against their own behavior to try to basically funnel all of that negative energy into something that would have no effect. I get like these invitations all the time, like, sign this petition, let the government know that you, and I'm like thinking, what good is my signature on this online Facebook petition going to do? I
think there's a lot of misdirection. Whether or not it's intentional, that would be hard to show. But so like, one thing I thought of was like the Will Smith slapping incident. Well, we have Ukraine going on. and it's like sometimes you sit back and again, like I'm not criticizing, we all do this, but you sit back and look at it's like, this is what we're mad about, right? There's a lot of misdirection there. Whether or not, if organizations can, organizations, you can talk to my friends in public relations, but they definitely try to control messaging and try to, that is a technique in communications. So definitely part of our skills as journalists is to call them out on it, right? To find the actual truth, which can be met with, varying degrees of success. But yeah, I would say definitely people try to steer the message to avoid, certain specific parts of conversation.
Well, especially like I could see techniques being developed to try to create a movement that's going to look too extreme or radical to sort of, I heard rumors like written speculation, or maybe it was this fact that back in the Nixon days, when when he was running for president, that according to the story, the Nixon administration hired a bunch of people to sort of present themselves in hippie-like attire, violently gesturing and rudely crying out, "We're for McGovern, we're for McGovern," in a way to actually help Nixon.
Yeah, it's like the false flag thing, right? You send people out to cover. So it's like the police do this a lot in protests. They will send, plainclothes officers out to stir up trouble in peaceful protests. And all of a sudden you have people reacting violently and they're the ones who instigate it. So now they can go arrest people, right? We have evidence of that. We have evidence when I lived in South Florida during the 2000 election, I was a college age student at the time, but when they were doing the recount for the Bush-Gore election and a bunch of young people stormed the office demanding to stop the recount, it was a bunch of campaign volunteers for the Bush campaign. It wasn't regular people. So, again, it's a common tactic, right? To try and steer a narrative. It's normal almost. So have I further depressed everybody about social media and how it makes life miserable for everybody?
I did see one student, I think Emily Wilcox, that you've evidently piqued her interest to find out more about other topics related to Psychology Day. Evidently she's very interested in what you had to say today. And so
very good.
I saw that pop up. I didn't go to the actual chat site there, but
I see it. Very good. Come visit journalism. We can teach you how to basically be a pirate in the Navy. Right? We're the last vestige of people, calling out people's BS. It's a lot of fun. But yeah, there's a lot going on, and it's a fascinating topic, and it's hard not to get despondent about this stuff when we talk about all the negative things, and social media plays a role. The first thing I tell all my journalism students is to stop watching cable news. That's probably the best thing you can do for your mental health, because it's not news, right? It's entertainment. I am in Burke Hawthorne Hall, room 109. Burke Hawthorne Hall, room 109. If the light's on, I'm here. Just come on by anytime. But yeah, it's important to keep this all in perspective. Sometimes we have to step away and realize, there are things in the real world that actually matter. Definitely.
Anybody else with a question, comment? Mrs. Waters, anything you want to share with us?
I'll get the full rundown later. The itemized.
Good job, Dr. Waters. You did.
Thank you.
Yeah. Right on.
You guys should meet. It seems like that.
What are the odds? There's another Waters in there.
Yeah. Right? Go figure.
I stopped watching cable news about a year ago. I can agree that was just for entertainment. So it's weird when I see, you go to a barbershop or a restaurant, you'll see Fox News playing in the corner. And when you stop watching this stuff for a while, it's like, you forget about it. And then you see it and it's so weird. Like, it's not journalism. I think people, they come into this side of our building and they think we're doing some specific thing. And it's just so odd to see this stuff. So yeah, it's definitely, it's bizarre. And it gets worse the further away you get from it. The more time you take away from it, the weirder it gets.
One of the things that I find to be interesting is that every once in a while, I will watch some of the programs on ESPN. Mm-hmm. Sports reporters will talk about and the pattern of communication and the argumentative structure is almost exactly the same on those sports debate programs as you get on cable news, debate oriented shows, which basically, is some version I know you are, what am I?
Yeah. One of the biggest criticisms of the media, which I think is fully justified, is now horse race coverage, is what they call it, which is a sports metaphor, right? We cover politics in terms of the polling, who's in the lead, who's doing this. It's rarely about policy anymore. It's rarely about the people themselves. It's more about the sports end of it, the competition behind it. So do you have any recent research on Slacktivism that you would suggest reading for anyone that is interested? Yes. Come by my office. I'm bad at remembering names and years, APA style citations from memory, but please send me an email or something. I'd be happy to recommend tons of articles about it. But yeah, I used to work in sports. A big chunk of my career was in sports journalism. And it's amazing how sports itself manufactures controversy. So they just basically make something up and ask an athlete about it. And the athlete will say, what are you talking about? Now we have a story that the athlete denied it. Now we have another day of coverage, right? And so now, and like you said, it's combative now. So now we can all sit there and yell at each other about it for a day. Yeah, I'm making this sound really bad, aren't I? Journalism, I mean, it's a mess. But yeah, it's just something we all need to be aware of, and we can do better, including my department, right? My goal is to teach young journalists and to be better at this stuff, and I think we all kind of agree on that. So yeah, it's always a work in progress.
Very interesting and intriguing, and would like to invite you, Dr. Waters, Mrs. Waters, anyone else out there to attend the next talk as well, beginning at 3 o'clock, piggybacking on what Dr. Waters spoke about a moment ago. Will be a talk beginning at 3 on fake news in the real world, some tips on how to detect fake news. And so like to invite you all to join us for that. Certainly enjoyed what you had to say today, Dr. Waters.
Thank you very much. And thank you all. I appreciate the feedback and everything. And I hope I meet you all in person someday. So thank you again.
We'll have to make a point of it.
Yes.
Blessings to you.
And thank you so much.
The talks have been great so far.
Yeah.
I've only been able to see the past few, but they've been really interesting.
Yeah,
they have been.
It's good. I want to have conversations with these people.
I'm sorry, say it again, Rick.
I want to have conversations with these people.
Yeah.